This is a shocker.
A bombshell announcement.
Shockwaves through energy markets.
Some major news in the Middle East. The United Arab Emirates announced today, pay attention to this, that it will officially leave OPEC.
It's a big moment in geopolitics. It's a big moment in the world's economy.
On April 28, 2026, the United Arab Emirates announced that after nearly 60 years, it was leaving one of the world's most powerful alliances of oil-producing countries.
This was a seismic split, but for the seasoned OPEC watchers though, this is something that has been rumoured for some time now.
They are saying it's purely an economic decision. They're saying they've got different priorities now, but some people are saying it's maybe a bit of a schism, a bit of a split between them and the Saudis.
Within OPEC, the organization of the petroleum exporting countries, Saudi Arabia has long been the largest producer and is the de facto leader. That gives it significant influence over how much oil OPEC puts into the market, and indirectly over oil prices. But the UAE's exit isn't just about oil and who controls it. The war in Iran and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important oil transit sea lane, have made it clear that this is also about power, politics, and shifting alliances in the Gulf.
The UAE's departure isn't necessarily a reaction to a single grievance. The UAE has a different future in mind, and it doesn't want to wait for consensus to catch up.
So, why did the UAE really leave OPEC? And what does that decision reveal about the country's post-oil strategy?
Abu Dhabi, une petite principauté désertique.
Let's go back to 1960. Very different world. Post-1945, post the war, oil was dominated by 7 big players, but none of them were countries. They were all oil companies.
Together, the so-called Seven Sisters controlled around 85% of the world's petroleum reserves.
So the countries thought, hang on a second, we want to take back control. So that's why in 1960, 5 countries, 4 out of the Middle East plus Venezuela, started OPEC to wrest control away from those Western oil companies and gain control of their immense reserves.
The Emirate of Abu Dhabi joined in 1967, 4 years before the formation of the United Arab Emirates. Over time, the UAE became one of OPEC's most important members, with the group's second largest spare production capacity after Saudi Arabia. For decades, OPEC has used production quotas to limit supply and help stabilize oil markets. But those quotas have also been a recurring source of tension, especially for countries that want to pump more. Angola's exit, for example, followed a dispute over its production quota. Ecuador also left after arguing that membership no longer served its economic interests. Consider the UAE's oil production capacity. As of 2025, the country could extract 4.85 million barrels per day, but under OPEC's limits, its quota was just under 3.5 million barrels per day, leaving roughly 1.3 million barrels a day of potential output unused.
The quotas were becoming a bit of an irritant for Abu Dhabi, and when I've spoken to senior Emirati officials over the years, you could really hear that frustration beneath the diplomatic language. OPEC's framework made perfect sense for the small oil-independent state that the UAE once was, but this economy is increasingly sophisticated.
And OPEC's grip on the market has been weakening. OPEC Plus still produces a large share of the world's crude, but its share has fallen from just over half of global production in 2016 to less than half by 2023. That's partly because more of the growth is now coming from outside the alliance, in countries such as the US, Canada, and Brazil.
OPEC really underestimated non-OPEC, the Canadians with their oil sands, the Americans with their shale, and other producers out there, well, including the likes of the Chinese and 1 or 2 European players. The feeling is that some of these producers want to capitalize on these immense reserves before the world moves on to other products. When you're sitting on over 100 billion barrels in the ground, you're thinking, well, are we ever going to get this stuff out of the ground? Are we ever going to be able to monetize it?
Capitalizing on its reserves has become more urgent for the UAE and other oil producers.
The strategy now is to use oil to become a post-oil economy. Some of the fastest growing sectors of the economy here are in areas like tourism and aviation and logistics and advanced manufacturing, for example, even life sciences. Oil now represents about 25% of UAE GDP, and that's down from over 30% in 2013. That is a structural transformation.
Following the country's OPEC exit in May 2026, ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi national oil company, announced $55 billion in project awards through 2028, aimed at expanding oil and gas capacity, industrial capacity, and local manufacturing. The UAE also plans to fast-track a new West-East pipeline designed to bypass choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. Just days after the UAE's announcement, OPEC+, the wider producer alliance that includes Russia, announced a modest oil output increase.
I don't think it's about quotas because I do believe pretty much every OPEC member will probably raise production above quotas initially for a few months to make up for the lost production right now.
Which raises the question, if OPEC was already preparing to let members pump more, why leave now?
Iran attacking 8 Gulf states, retaliating against U.S. and Israeli strikes Saturday.
The Iran war basically changed everything about how the UAE views its regional relationships.
On February 28, the US and Israel launched wide-scale coordinated airstrikes on Iranian targets, triggering a wider regional conflict.
Iran targeted Emirati territory directly. They sent smoke over Dubai's skyline. Abu Dhabi really absorbed those attacks largely alone.
The attacks included energy infrastructure in Fujairah, one of the UAE's key oil hubs.
Sitting over the table with Iran in OPEC, perhaps they're finding that more and more difficult.
For the Middle East, across the board, the damage to infrastructure should not be underestimated. And this is not just about oil, right? Some of the countries have openly come out and said the damage that has been done to upstream gas infrastructure. And remember, a lot of this gas is associated gas. And if the gas can't flow, the oil can't flow either.
The war also changed the mood inside OPEC.
In my history, there's always been angst with Iran and some of the other GCC nations as well. But they've always said at OPEC, we leave the politics at the door and it's purely about price and oil. The recent conflict has really tested that.
The UAE and Saudi Arabia are the standard setters for Gulf foreign policy. These are countries that are brothers and partners, but it's also fair to say, like most families, they have their differences. What really looked like an unbreakable alliance a decade ago has developed some fault lines. More recently, these countries are on the opposite sides of a growing list of pressure points, including Sudan and Yemen.
The GCC countries, the Gulf cooperation countries, have had a really good relationship, but rivalry over financial services, over trade, over tourism, over a whole host of issues as well, certainly appears to be coming to the fore as well.
The UAE aligned very closely with the US and Israel at the onset of the war, while Saudi Arabia has worked more quiet diplomatic channels, and Riyadh has also come to view elements of that UAE alignment in poor light.
The Abraham Accords, brokered by the US in 2020, normalized relations between Israel and several Arab states, including the UAE. But after the Iran war, those ties took on greater strategic significance. The UAE was already a major US security partner, and the two countries have deepened cooperation in defense innovation, AI, and advanced technology.
The UAE is going to use higher hydrocarbon revenues now to fund everything from AI investments with the most sophisticated American technology partners to deepening its $1.4 trillion investment relationship with the United States. The map is genuinely being redrawn. The UAE might actually reconsider other regional memberships beyond OPEC as Abu Dhabi maps out its post-war future. The UAE's bet now is that its future belongs in Washington's orbit, in the Abraham Accords framework, and of course at the table of global tech and finance, not at the table of OPEC.
Ultimately, it's a good thing for getting the price of gas down, getting oil down, getting everything down. They have it all. He's a great leader, actually. So no, I'm okay. They're having some problems in OPEC.
For the US, a weaker OPEC may sound like good news, with more supply and lower oil prices. But while many are focused on what the move means for oil prices today, the bigger question is what it means for the system that has helped manage oil supply for more than half a century.
We could see other countries leaving. We could even see a fraying of the OPEC Plus. What I really am interested in is what the relationship between Russia and Saudi will look like going forward. But even if countries don't go, what is the adherence to production quotas going to look like?
I think the market tends to want to write the obituary for OPEC all the time, but it's actually been proven wrong time and time again. The job of OPEC is to make sure that prices are stable for both consumers and producers. I don't think UAE leaving is beneficial or non-beneficial for anyone.
This might not even be good for US, because if it does induce volatility, if it does induce price declines, then this much lauded US energy independence, that will be under threat.
And if more producers start prioritizing their own capacity, their own revenues, and their own national strategies, the market becomes harder to coordinate.
None of them want a price war, but what they do want is market share. We have to put the premise in that these wars will end. Then you're going to have an awful lot of production out there. The Russians are going to want to rebuild the economy. The Iranians are going to rebuild their economy. The Americans, of course, are going to want to carry on with their energy independence and enjoying this position they've got because they're exporting more US oil product than they have done in decades.
We very much believe that the world is in a deficit right now. We are losing over 1 billion barrels of oil, and it is going to be needed. More production is going to be needed down the line to refill the depleted stocks, to refill new tanks that come up.
The UAE's exit alone could probably add around 2 million barrels per day to global supply. That's going to be really meaningful relief for the energy importing economies and a real headache for the higher cost producers. Looking long term though, a major producer going fully independent really introduces a new competitive dynamic into the global oil markets. Of course, the OPEC group will adapt, but it's going to need to become leaner and more flexible to stay relevant in a world where one of its most capable members just decided that it no longer needs to be in the room.